Great.
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, so good morning. Welcome to our presentation today on the U.S. Census 2020. My name is Clara Mendonca, and I'm a librarian here at the Barrington Library. I've been here for about 3 years, and this presentation will also be presented by my colleague, also a librarian, Siobhan Egan. And in just a few moments, I'll hand her over so she can introduce herself, and she will also give a little introduction onto using Zoom. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about what the U.S. Census 2020 is, why it's important, why it's particularly important in 2020, how to take it, and some common questions and concerns that those usually have with taking it regarding security. So now I'd like to hand it over to Siobhan.
All right. So like Clara said, my name is Siobhan. I'm a librarian at the Barrington Library. I work in the reference department, and I also work up in the children's room. So we just wanted to run through Zoom really fast, just in case, Ted, you've never used it before. So you'll see, you mute down at the bottom so you can mute yourself. If you'd like to run your video, that's perfectly fine. If not, that's okay too. If you click on the participants tab, you'll be able to, it'll bring a pop-up so that you'll be able to see everyone who's in the meeting. You'll also have the option there to raise your hand if you end up having a question throughout the duration of the presentation. Feel free to raise your hand and ask your question. And you can also chat to us by clicking the chat thing on the bottom, and that'll bring up the chat, and you can send a message to everyone or just me and Clara. And we can monitor questions there. So if you have a question throughout the presentation, feel free to raise your hand and ask. Otherwise, we will have time at the end as well. So, all right, Clara, if you want to begin.
All right, great. And we're so glad to have you, Ted. All right. So the first thing I'd like to show is this video from the U.S. Census Bureau that goes over the 2020 census. It's a really great video. It goes over all of the basics, and I think it's very well done. So this is about 2 minutes long, so we'll get started with that.
You know what, Clara, since you have your headphones in, we're not going to be able to hear the audio.
What was that?
Since you have your headphones in, I don't think we're going to be able to hear the audio.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
The data can be used to inform.
Let me start that over. Sorry, guys.
The data can be used. What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution and comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community.
How will 2020 census data be used? Where there are more people, there are more needs for public services. That's why the census is used by the government to inform funding decisions each year. But that's not all. It's also used by nonprofits to inform services, by businesses to create jobs, and even by students for school projects. Understanding how the population changes helps us shape communities across the country for the better.
How does the 2020 census affect representation? There are 435 seats in the House of Representatives. These get distributed to the 50 states by population, and an accurate census response helps your state get the right amount of seats. States with smaller populations get at least one, while states with larger populations might get more.
How do I take the 2020 census? In March 2020, every address in the country will receive an invitation to complete a simple questionnaire, and there are 3 ways to respond. Number 1, do it online. Number 2, call by phone. Number 3, send it by mail. For those who don't respond, a census taker from your community will follow up and assist you.
Is my 2020 census data safe? After sending your census response, your personal information is kept safe. By law, it can't be shared with any other government agency, law enforcement, or landlord. No one. So take your 2020 census with peace of mind. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
All right, so on this slide, I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of the census. So first, as the video states, the census is a questionnaire that is given out every 10 years. And in the census, it's a basic questionnaire that asks you about basic information about yourself and your family. And so the results of the census are very important because it impacts just about everything. And a census is actually mandated in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 2, and the first census was in 1790. And the last census in 2010, there was a 74% mailback response rate, which isn't really that high. And as a result, census costs were significantly lower than originally expected. So the Census Bureau returned $1.6 billion to the U.S. Treasury. And that's a big deal because that money could have been used to better the community, to fund and plan additional services for all age groups. So it really is a shame that if we're not getting an accurate count, then we can't better the community because no one's really taking it seriously. So it's very important to complete the census. And so the importance of the census in Rhode Island is that taking the census gives us fair representation. We all really do count, and if we don't have an accurate count, then the census isn't, it can't be done properly, and the results of it, we just can't, it impacts community initiatives, which I'm going to talk about further, but it also impacts redistricting. And what's particularly important about that this year, which is probably one of the biggest things about Rhode Island census, is that Rhode Island could possibly lose one congressional seat, having one single seat at large. And since 1843, Rhode Island has had at least 2 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it actually had 3 seats from 1913 to 1930. So we definitely do need more representatives. So it is a big deal. If we're not getting an accurate count, then we can't have as many seats as we should have. So it's very, very important to take the census for that reason. And I'm not sure if you knew, but census results impacts the state and presidential elections. So let's keep that in mind for this election season coming up. And the importance of the census in Barrington, as I mentioned, the census really does impact everything. Especially funding for community initiatives such as schools, fire departments, police stations. It impacts the staffing for that. It impacts really just about everything. It also impacts the economy. So census results impacts businesses making jobs. It impacts housing. And it impacts our reputation here in Barrington too. So I'm not sure if you knew, but for the last 2 censuses in 2000 and 2010, Barrington actually had one of the highest response rates, 85% around, actually the highest response rate. Let me emphasize that. So we've been doing really well with that. So let's keep up the spirit here and keep replying to the census so we can still have that highest ranking result here in Barrington.
So something that's new with the census in 2020 is it now can be completed entirely online. And there's really a push for that this year because it's much easier to count the information, to record the information, and then to be able to disperse funds accordingly in a lot more, a better, faster manner. However, if you're not comfortable taking it online, you can also mail in your census form, or you can call and take it by phone, which will give you those numbers later. Households that do not respond to the census will be visited by a census taker or enumerator to collect that information starting in June. And as far as we know right now, as far as the information we have, they're still planning on sending out enumerators. That could change due to the COVID-19 situation, but as of now, they're still planning on doing that. So we want to make sure that everyone is taking the census online, taking it by phone if they want to, so that, all that data is, collected, and we don't have people, going door to door. So that's something to keep in mind. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about general safety when taking the census. So when you're taking the census, you will never be asked for your social security number. You'll never be asked for money or donations. And you'll never be told or asked for anything on behalf of a political party. And you'll never be asked for your bank or credit card account numbers. So this can be while you're taking it online, over the phone, or with someone in person. They should never be asking for any of this information. And if they do not participate and contact the Census Bureau. In person, if someone does come to your door, a representative should always have a valid ID badge with a photograph, a U.S. Department of Commerce watermark, and an expiration date, and they should be able to provide that to you upon request or right when they show up. And again, if they are not able to provide that, do not participate and contact the Census Bureau. All right, so when it comes to the information that you're going to be providing on the census, this information is only used by the Census Bureau for statistical purposes. Even though you're providing identifying information to the Census Bureau, your identity is kept anonymous, ensuring confidentiality. And by law, the Bureau is not allowed to release any of the identifiable information you provide to anyone, including law enforcement agencies. So anything you provide to the Census Bureau is kept safe and secure. And Census Bureau employees actually do take an oath to protect your information, so you can be assured that any information you provide on the census will be kept safe. And speaking of safety, we do also, since it will be taken online this year, we want to talk a little bit about online security, since that has been a main concern of a lot of people who are looking to take the census. So your census responses are secure and they're protected by federal law under Title 13 of the U.S. Code. The Census Bureau has, reassured everyone that they have robust cybersecurity program that incorporates industry best practices and security standards for encrypting data. And what that means is that the information you provide to them will be kept safe and secure on their servers, and it will not be given out to anyone. There are ways that you can make sure that you're protecting yourself as well. So when you are visiting the Credit Bureau's website, you want to look for two things. You want to look for a lock symbol up near the web address. It may be gray, it may be green. And you also want to look that the address begins with HTTPS, which ensures that it's a secure website. If you don't see those markers on the Census Bureau's website, do not participate in the census and contact the Census Bureau.
So on this slide, we're going to talk about how to actually take the census. So since it's now April, you should have already received an invitation in the mail to take the census. And in that invitation, it will include a unique ID that you'll be asked to enter when completing the form online. And so you can also respond without the unique ID. Like, let's say that you forgot your invitation, you've lost it, you're not sure where it is, you can respond without it. So that's absolutely fine. And you can take the census at 2020census.gov, or as Siobhan has mentioned, you can take it by phone if you're more comfortable with that. And at the end of the presentation, we do have some links, and one of them is actually taking it on the phone, because you can take it in several different languages. So if you're interested in that, Ted, we can show you that as well.
All right, so the next thing we wanted to do is kind of take a walk through the questionnaire so that we're all prepared for what questions will be asked, so that there's no surprises and you kind of get an idea of what sort of information will be gathered on this year's census. The 2020 census is super easy. As the representative of your household, which we're assuming since you're joining this meeting, that you are going to be the representative for your household, or you can pass that information on to them. You're going to answer one simple questionnaire about yourself and everyone who's living with you on April 1st. So there only needs to be one census response per household. The people living with you can include children, grandparents, roommates, domestic partners, foster children, or anyone else. There have been a couple COVID-19 adjustments to this idea of who's living in your household. So for example, if there is a family and they have a child home from college, who would, under normal circumstances, be living at the university and go to school there, but they're home now, they should not be counted in the household census. The universities are going to take care of counting their students as if everyone was on campus. So you don't want to count that person. However, if you have someone living with you who under normal circumstances wouldn't be there, such as a sibling or a parent or a neighbor or someone, you do want to count them. We want to make sure everyone's counted in the place that they're living, even temporarily in cases like that, just to make sure we're accurately counting and representing everyone. One other thing to add is that none of the questions are compulsory. So if for any reason you do not feel like a question represents you or you don't want to answer it, you don't need to. You can still continue on with this rest of the census without answering a specific question. So if there's information you don't want to provide for any reason, you don't have to, and in the end, your census will still be counted. So that's something to keep in mind as we're going through the questions. All right, so we'll move on to question 1. So this is the big question for the census because it is about counting people. They want to know how many people are living in your household on April 1st, 2020. And this number of people is going to include you. So if it's you and a spouse and 2 young children, it would be 4. If it's just you, it'd be 1. If it was you and 4 roommates, it would be 5. So you want to make sure you're counting all the people who are living with you. All right, and then question 2 is kind of a jumping off point of the first question. They want to know, are there any additional people staying there that you did not include in question 1? So this would be where you would denote if you did have a college student home with you, you could answer, children on this one, just to denote that, yeah, there is someone there, but you're not counting them in your census and they're going to be counted elsewhere, just because we want to make sure that everyone is counted once and they're counted in their right place. The third question relates to home ownership versus renting. So the government would like to know whether or not you own your house with a mortgage. Do you own it outright, free and clear? Do you rent your home, or are you occupying your home without payment of rent? This is a really important question because it helps produce statistics about home ownership, which the rates of homeownership serve as one indicator of a nation's economy, and they help communities administer housing programs, planning, and decision-making for their community. The fourth question is going to be, what is your telephone number? This will be only if the Census Bureau needs to contact you in regards to anything on your census. So if anything is unclear, if anything is contradictory, they want to be able to contact you. You don't need to provide this, but it could be helpful if there were any concerns and you want to make sure that your census is counted in the end. So it'd be a good thing to include. So the fifth question, this is where the census moves from questions about your household to questions about specific individuals in your household. So this question is going to pertain to you, person 1, who's the census taker and the representative of the household. So this question is going to be about you, and if you have any other people in your household, those will be denoted by person 2, 3, 4, and so on. So this question is asking for your first name, middle initial, and last name. And then question 6, again, is relating to you. So they're asking what your sex is, male or female. And this question is important because it allows the Census Bureau and the government to create statistics about males and females, which can be used in planning and funding government programs. The data can also be used to enforce laws, regulations, and policies against discrimination.
So question 7 asks what your age and your date of birth is. And let's say that you have a baby in the house that is less than a year old. The Census Bureau does ask to write 0 as the age, do not write it in months. So in the boxes provided, in the format that it asks for, you will write your age and your birth date here. So you would use a 0 for the month and the day if it's not a two-digit number. And so this question is important because the Census Bureau wants to get some statistics on the age groups and characteristics here, and that also affects planning and funding for programs such as programs for children and older adults. And so to make a note from the Census Bureau here, Census Bureau asks for you to answer both questions 8 and 9. And question 8 is asking if you are of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. And the census states that for the census that Hispanic origins are not races. So here you will check off if you're not of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin, or yes if you're Mexican, Mexican American, yes if you're Puerto Rican, yes Cuban, or if this does apply to you but you're not any of these specific origins here, you will check off yes and then write out what other origin it could be. For example, like Dominican, Colombian, Ecuadorian, etc. And this question is important because the Census Bureau wants to get some statistics about this ethnic group. And for question 9, it's asking your race. So you can mark one or more boxes and then print your origins. So if you identify as white, you would print, for example, if you are German, Irish, English, Italian, Lebanese, Egyptian, etc. Or if you identify as Black or African American, or American Indian or Alaskan Native, if you identify as Chinese or another Asian origin, you would print that out. Or again, if you identify as another race or origin, you will check off some other race and then write out what you identify as. And so this question is important again because the Census Bureau wants to get a general sense of racial groups and ethnic groups. And these questions are important in particular because they want to make sure that agencies are respecting the provisions set in the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And so for question 10, this asks you to print the name of person 2 in your household. And so I will mention here at this point in the census, with person 2, the following questions are going to pertain to question 2. As Siobhan mentioned, the census does ask questions about every member in your household. So you will want to print the name, the first name, middle initial, if there is one, and the last name of person 2. And question 11 asks if this person, being person 2, and then person 3, 4, however many people are in your household, this will also be asked. It asks if this person usually lives or stays somewhere else. So you will want to mark all that applies here. So for example, if you have someone who's living here temporarily because of COVID-19, like for example, if it's a child or a family member or a friend who does not usually live here, you would still check this off. And this question is important because the Census Bureau wants to make sure that everyone is counted correctly and is counted once. So this question, it makes it a bit easier for the Census Bureau to determine if maybe someone was counted incorrectly or is being counted twice. So make sure that whoever is in your household on April 1st, that you mark off any of these other options here. And so for question 12, it's going to ask how person 2 and so on, however many people are in your household, is related to you, person 1. So this could be a spouse, your child, your grandparent, it could be domestic partner, it could be really anyone here. So you will just want to mark off one box on how this person's related to you. And this question is asked because the Census Bureau wants to get a sense of family relationships here, and also to kind of figure out, like who is living with you, and again, to kind of tell if maybe someone is living there that should not be living, that wouldn't normally be living there. So that is why that question is asked. So do you have any questions, Ted? If you do, you might want to unmute yourself. Let's see.
He said in the chat he didn't have none at the moment, so
Okay.
we're good.
All right.
Okay. So if you do end up deciding that you do have questions at any time, or when you're starting to fill out the census, we're at the Barrington Library. We're here to help you. We can answer any questions you have about the history of the census, certain questions, why questions are being asked and all that. You can feel free to email us at barringtonreference@gmail.com. You can also message us on Facebook or on Twitter, or using the library help chat box on the Barrington website. However, if you have any questions regarding your specific census while you're filling it out, for example, how do I answer this specific question with these people in my household? You'll want to direct those questions to the Census Bureau, because they'll be able to help you a little better. And we can help you get in contact with the Census Bureau if you need that. But specific questions can be directed to the Census Bureau.
Also, for additional questions, Siobhan and I have compiled a list of some online sources about the census. So for example, we have the official 2020 census website. We have the census website, and some facts about Rhode Island specifically from the census official website, and the state of Rhode Island website with a little section on the census. And also, if you're interested in taking the census by phone, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a link here that walks you through the steps of registering and taking census by phone. And the census is offered in many languages, so you can choose if there's another language you'd rather take it in. And also, what's really important here is if you'd like to report any fraud, if you suspect any, there is a number that you can call here to contact the local Census Bureau and speak to a representative. But also before that, if you do suspect that someone visits your home or contacts you who is not a legitimate Census Bureau representative, we urge you to contact your local police department and then contact the local Census Bureau by that number. And I know that you're not a resident of Barrington, Ted, but this is to, show people that Barrington has the highest response rate, and to urge people that are Barrington residents to take the census.
Yep. So that's basically all we had for today for our census presentation. We're really happy that you could join us. We hope that we were able to give you some good information about how to complete the census and why it's important to complete the census this year, especially for Rhode Island. So if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us. And that's about it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.